It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a tremendous day out there today. A couple more days of cold. Took a peek at the extended forecast. I like to do that when I need some good news. Saturday looks like it's going to be about 30. Sunday looks like it's going to be about 40. We're going to get there just a couple more days. Thursday and Friday are going to be cold, but we'll get there, you guys. We'll get there. Next thing you know, it'll be March. Next thing you know, it'll be April. And away we go. Good show coming up. Kent Youngblood from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a couple minutes. We are going to talk Gophers women's basketball. They have an important game tonight against Purdue. Purdue, one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. The Gophers desperately need to take care of business against Purdue as they try to reach the NCAA tournament this season. Kent and I will also talk Lynx, offseason Lynx basketball, a couple of signings they've made recently, and then Kent turned the tables and asked me a question: who would I put in my all-time starting five for the Lynx, using players from any era? And it's an interesting question because of all the great players they've had over the years, the great players they had during their, dynasty, a decade or so ago, and go from there. So Kent and I will get into that in just a little bit. Some Twins base stealing thoughts at the end of the show. First, though, what I missed, speaking of stealing, the Gophers men's basketball team went out to Los Angeles and basically stole two games, one from USC the other day, and then late Tuesday against UCLA. And that might have been the even bigger heist. They were down 17 points in the first half. Looked like they were DOA. That road trip, that swing to go out and play those two new LA teams in the Big Ten has been tough on teams. I think they were the sixth team to do it. Only one before them had swept it. That was Michigan, a very good team. A bunch of teams had gotten swept, a couple had split, so a tough way to go, a tough place to play. It's just, adjusting your body, you're staying out there, stuff like that. And UCLA is a good team. They are in the NCAA tournament mix right now, although probably did themselves no favors Tuesday, losing 64-61 to the Gophers. Minnesota took their first lead of the game on a Lu'Cye Patterson layup with like a minute left. UCLA came back and got a bucket. Patterson did it again, and then Dawson Garcia sealed it with a couple free throws at the end. I stayed up and watched the end of that game when I saw that it was getting close. Watched UCLA absolutely botch things. They missed, what do they think? It were 5 of 15 from the free throw line, something like that, in the second half, including 4 misses down the stretch where they could have expanded their lead, taken a lead, stuff like that. I think one time they were up by 1, missed a pair. That was right before Patterson's first layup that gave them the lead, and then they had a chance to make 2 later and missed both of those as well. Just an unbelievable disappointment if you are a UCLA fan. Mick Cronin, their head coach, was going for win number 500. His dad was in the stands. I think they call him Pep. His dad was in the stands trying to watch him go for this history. His dad used to be a high school coach, a longtime basketball coach. He knows ball. You would think, right? UCLA was like a, 11, 12, 13-point favorite at various points before the game tipped. Like, this was supposed to be a pretty lopsided result for them. So you would think, okay, if you're Mick Cronin's dad and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go watch my son get win number 500, this is a pretty good opportunity to do that. You would think that was going to be the case, and it looked like it was early. They were dominating that game until they weren't. They couldn't make their free throws, and they paid for it. The Gophers know that script all too well. That has befallen them this season as well. After the game, interestingly, Mick Cronin, the UCLA head coach, kind of blamed the UCLA fans, not his own players, for missing the free throws. This is what he said. All we're worried about is our shooting. Our crowd's mind is on the wrong stuff. They made it worse. The stress in Pauley Pavilion, is crazy. How about help the guys? Cheer for the guy. If he's not trying to miss the free throw, everyone's mind is on the wrong stuff. I would include Mick Cronin's mind is on the wrong stuff if he thinks the fans are the problem here. Make your damn free throws if you want to win the game. These guys are not amateurs anymore. This is a semi-pro basketball league now with all the NIL money. This is only going to increase. The scrutiny is only going to increase as time goes on. His focus is in the wrong place. I'm sure he's disappointed that one got away from them. They're trying to battle, like I said, for an NCAA tournament spot. They've got 10 conference wins already. They're still like 28th in the net even after that bad loss. Gophers in the net rating, by the way, are a fascinating story. They're still down at like 89 overall, nowhere near the NCAA tournament, although they do have 2 very winnable games coming up in their next 2. I believe that is against Northwestern and Penn State, so a chance to get well. I flip-flop the order, but Penn State and Northwestern, both of those home games, Saturday and then again next Tuesday. A chance to get to 8 and 9 in the conference if you can win both those games. Then it's at Nebraska, that'll be much tougher. Home against Wisconsin, that'll be even tougher still. And then at Rutgers, a decent team. So does get a little harder towards the end of the season, but you can see them getting to 8 or 9 wins potentially on a season that started, 0-6 in the Big Ten, something like that. They were terrible at the start of the year. Now they have 4 Quad 1 wins and 3 Quad 2 wins. Nobody else in the top, only one other team in the top 50 of the net, or the bottom, below 50. Only one other team below 50 in the net. Let me start that again. One more team below 50 in the net has that many Quad 1 plus Quad 2 wins. I think that's Wake Forest at 58. Only one team way down there with the Gophers has as many as 4 Quad 1 wins. It's a crazy season they're having where they've let some games slip away. They've lost some games they maybe should have won. Now that we've seen them win some of these games they maybe should have lost. But you add it all up, momentum now for this team, momentum now for this program, momentum now, I would suppose, for head coach Ben Johnson, who keeps putting together impressive wins after a terrible start to the season. They lost all those players in the offseason. They are starting to come together. Dawson Garcia was massive in this game. Didn't even call his name out yet, but 32 points, including, I believe, 27 in the second half. He was tremendous, sparking that comeback. He had he had half their points, 32 of their 64. He has been a beast. Patterson made 3 huge plays down the stretch with the 2 layups and taking a charge in the closing seconds while UCLA was trying to get the go-ahead bucket. He was huge in this game. Gophers a much more fun watch right now. They are determined. They are not giving up on this season. I don't know where that gets them in the end, but it got UCLA in the end on Tuesday. I am happy to be joined today by Kent Youngblood from the Star Tribune. Covers Gophers women's basketball, covers the Minnesota Lynx, of course. Kent, how you doing?
Good. You?
I am doing pretty well, thank you. Doing maybe a little bit better than the Gophers, who probably could have used that win over Oregon over the weekend. They didn't get it. So now they're 7-8 in the conference. They've got to beat Purdue on Wednesday. It's been a team that's avoided bad losses, but doesn't have a lot of great wins. And there's still a lot of work to do, even though, the net rankings, things like that, shows them in a pretty good place. What do we make of where they're at right now? Let's start there.
Well, they're 5-0 in the conference against teams that are in the bottom 5 of the league. And so they've only got 2 wins. They're 2-8 against teams other than the bottom 5 teams. As it looks now, they're probably their best victory so far is against Illinois, which is really playing well lately, and Indiana. I think both of those teams will be in the tournament. But I really believe they need to win. They need to be 9-9 heading into the Big Ten tournament, so they probably have to win 2 of their next 3.
So beating Purdue is a big one because that's a team towards the bottom of the conference. But then it's Washington and Michigan State, 2 teams that they certainly could beat, one or both of them, but both of them are right now in the top 50 of the net, and they're 33, 34. So no guarantees there. A chance to get a good win, 1 or 2 of those games, but it's still a lot hanging in the balance right now, it seems like.
Yeah, the Washington game. They're a 5-win Big Ten team, but they've played a really, really tough schedule. That's probably why their net ranking is so good. I think they played Notre Dame and South Carolina in the non-conference. That if the season were to end today, Washington would be the Gophers' first round matchup in the Big Ten tournament. So, and I don't necessarily see that changing. So this could be the first of two games against Washington in the next couple of weeks. But Washington is behind them. Purdue is a 2-win Big Ten team, although they won their last 2 home games.
Okay.
But they really need to win that one, and then they need to come home after a week off, plenty of time to prepare, and they need to beat Washington. Then they'll be a 9-win team, and, then you go to a pretty good Michigan State team where it'll be pretty tough to win on the road.
What's bare minimum at this point to get into the NCAA tournament? Do we figure 9 wins in the regular season and 1 win in the Big Ten tournament? Does that get them there?
Well, I mean, according to ESPN's bracketologist, the Gophers are in right now.
Yeah, I'm saying they're in right now, but there's games to play still. I mean,
I think if they finish 9-9 in the conference, it'd be pretty hard to keep them out.
It's a great conference. It's such a deep.
I think they're saying 12, 13 teams will make it, and right now the Gophers are 12th. So
when they've struggled to beat better teams, obviously we know they've had some injury problems. Mara Braun has been out for a good portion of this season again. What is it that keeps them from getting over the hump against some of these better teams? Is it one thing consistently?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's no question. I mean, it wasn't just Braun. Taylor Woodson was a big loss too. I mean, Braun was their best player, and Taylor Woodson was top 7 in their rotation. So I think that they've played their starters a lot of minutes, and they're starting to get a little tired, frankly. They don't have they have very balanced scoring amongst the starters, but they don't have, like Amara Braun would be, somebody who, when it's a 2-point game in the final minute, that you just give the ball to and say they got to get a basket.
Yeah. That makes sense.
They struggle at times to attain and maintain offensive rhythm. They play very good they play hard defense. And after taking care of the ball so well at the start of the season, they started turning the ball over. In their overtime loss at Ohio State, the Buckeyes scored 30 points off of turnovers. And against Oregon scored 23 points off of turnovers. So it was a 6-point game, and they're outscored by 18 on turnovers. So, season high 7, I think, turnovers for Amaya. You just can't have your point guard doing that.
That Ohio State game was a near miss, kind of miraculous win. They came back from so many down at the end of regulation. That would have been nice to have banked that in the win column. Alas, they didn't, but that would change the tune on where they'd sit right now, I would imagine, if they had won that game.
I really was convinced when they came all the way back to force overtime that they were going to win that game. But then their defense went south in the overtime. I think Ohio State missed 1 shot in overtime.
Yeah.
So, I think that at some point, we're going to have to move away from even the concept of a moral victory. You got to get a good win. Yeah.
Well, I think they need at least 2, if not 3 more actual victories, not moral victories, to ensure they make the NCAA tournament, which was a realistic and reasonable goal at the start of the year. Then you lose, like you say, Mara Braun and Taylor Woodson. It still is within their reach, and it feels probably at least, I would say likely at this point, but maybe better than a coin flip that they do the things they need to do to get in. It's been I think it's a year that's shown us a little something regardless. And again, no moral victories. You got to win the games. But I think if what we saw last year in Dawn Plitze-White's first year was kind of her putting a little bit of her mark on the program, I think we've seen that even more this year. We know the identity of this team when they play the way they want to play.
Their identity is defense. I don't know if the offense has come along or has come as far as the defense, but defense you can play without, with a good. I mean, the Lynx showed it last summer that
Yes.
you can play great defense without having, absolutely top-notch athletes at every position. You just have to be moving as one, well coached and disciplined. Offense is a little harder, especially in the Big Ten, when you don't have two of your top 6 or 7 players.
Yeah. That's true, and I think that's the long way of saying, like, you can be a really good defensive team without necessarily all the talent in the world, but someone's got to put the ball in the basket offensively, and if you're missing your best offensive player, that is going to be a bit of a struggle. Do you think they get there? Do you think they get to the finish line and get this to the tournament?
You really have to ask me after I see what happens at Purdue tomorrow.
Yeah,
I can say that my gut tells me yes. After the loss against Oregon, Coach Lu'Cye said that at this point in the development of her team, it's hard with little or no turnaround time between games, especially against opponents they don't know. Her term was, this team doesn't have a high basketball IQ yet. And so now they play at Purdue, which is a 2-win team, and they should win that game. And then they have a week off because they have a bye this coming weekend, right? So they have an entire week to get ready for a Washington team that they haven't played because they're new to the league. But this team, generally speaking, has played pretty well when it's been allowed to prepare like that for a team. So if you get those 2 wins, I think you're in.
That makes sense. Well, I've got you here. Let's talk a little bit of Lynx. They've made some signings and re-signings, trying to keep the magic going. I mean, I think it's a valid question. Like, going forward, like, can they do this again? I think a lot of the same pieces are there, but can you do this again? But it seems like they're on a good path with what they've started to do already this offseason.
Well, I would say that anybody who's a sports fan in Minnesota historically should know that the whole concept of, we almost got there, we're running it back, it'll be better this time. What happens when people think
it's never worked? It is absolutely, you got to go back to the Vikings of the 70s before you see a team that was consistently great for a long stretch of time. I
mean,
aside from the
Vikings in '98 brought just about everybody back, and were above average but not great anymore. Right. Timberwolves, not a great comparison because of the trade. The Lynx are a very well-coached team. They're a very close team. They're led by a player who is extraordinary both in her ability and in her ability to keep a team together. They do play as one. They were the poster team for greater than the sum of its parts type of last year. But they were also, for the most part, extraordinarily healthy last year. No key players really were hurt for any great length of time.
No, like Collier was out for a little bit before the All-Star break.
She missed like 4 or 5 games.
Break. Yeah, the Olympic break.
Yeah, right before the Olympic break. I will say that, and I'm not just saying this because I grew up in Minnesota and I feel like everybody's against Minnesota teams. The national view of the Lynx has, in recent years, since the dynasty time, has consistently underestimated. Okay. And people are doing that again now in this kind of Wild West kind of last free agency before the new collective bargaining agreements. Wait till next summer. Everybody's going to be a free agent.
Yeah.
And the the Lynx have brought back their starting 5 back.
Yeah.
They re-signed Natisha Heidemann, who is their top backup guard. And they signed a French center named Mariam Badienne, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. 30-year-old veteran, top-notch EuroLeague player who was the starting center on the French team that made it to the gold medal game against Team USA last summer.
Almost
in
beat
fact,
them.
when our friend Chris Miller posted that's the story of her signing, the picture they used was of Betty M blocking Collier at the basket.
Okay.
But she's a defensive, great defensive capability, very versatile, and she can stretch the floor, so she fits perfectly into what they do. So I would say that expectations should be high for that team, but some of the key teams that are standing in their way are better. I think Las Vegas is better. I think Indiana will be a dark horse favorite. That team looks pretty good right now. New York will be just as good. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
We talked about Collier in being just this star who kind of combines this rare, ability to perform, but also lead and still have this element of humility about her. I feel like the national recognition of her, the national appreciation of her took a step forward, a pretty significant one last year. I mean, she was right up there in MVP voting, stuff like that. I still don't know if we appreciate her enough, even as that has grown. What do you think? Is she?
Well, this whole Unrivaled thing has pushed her to a new level of popularity. She was great in that one-on-one tournament. She's the leading scorer in that league. She's kind of extraordinary in general. She, a mom, business owner. She sort of helps. I'm forgetting her name. Started that league. She's just kind of the complete package. She's businesswoman, family, player, teammate. Fans should appreciate that. But let me ask you a question. So you got a player who has won 2 gold medals, started on the last team that won the gold medal, runner-up MVP voting, top 5 2 years ago. Where does she rank all time on the Lynx?
That's a great question. Brianna Stewart, by the way, was the other
Brianna Stewart, right?
Yes. All time on the Lynx. That's a good question because I feel like anytime they do like the all-time Lynx teams, it's basically like the entire dynasty team and then everybody else. It's a hard question because
you got to throw Katie Smith in there too.
Yep, Katie Smith, and then obviously the 5, and then you kind of rotated through some bigs because you had Sylvia Fowles, you had McCarville for some of it, you had Taj McWilliams, Franklin for some of it. I mean, I guess maybe we start with who is the all-time greatest Lynx player, and that's probably got to be Maya Moore, right? Like she was the one.
For body of work, I would go with Simone.
Okay, really? Simone over Maya? I don't know. And then you got Lindsay, who
Maya Moore had a very Kirby Puckett-like career.
Short, but shorter than
ablaze, gone. Win, leave. Simone was an all-star before that Hall happened, and she was the MVP of the very first title. And I'd at the very least make them co-number 1.
Okay, I think that's fair. They didn't start winning until Maya got there, but it was already, the pieces were already starting to accumulate by the time she got there. I mean, she's definitely she's got to be in the top 5 just because of how good she is, but I don't exactly know who to bump off. Maybe we're bumping off, or we're saying Maya, Simone Augustus, Lindsay Whalen, Nafisa Collier, and Sylvia Fowles, and maybe that makes Rebecca Brunson 6. But
Katie Smith was pretty good too.
She just doesn't get the glory because those teams didn't make the playoffs much, or they got to 1 or 2 playoff series, but she was great. I mean, she was I'm
not going to actually say because I got to cover these folks and I don't want to offend anybody. But I'm thinking on first off the bench in history.
She's still on the bench.
6.
She's got more to do. 6. She's got more to do. Yeah, it's hard because they got a bunch of their players aren't just like getting their jerseys retired. They're going into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Like that's how good.
We're going to get 2 more this year, I think. Both Sylvia and Maya finalists, and I can't imagine a scenario in which either would not make it.
Right. So, I mean, that's basically like your entire. Yeah. So, I mean,
and Brunson has more rings than anybody in history.
That's right. She's got 5, right? So you've got that. I mean, I guess maybe a good way to think about that is like when it's all said and done, will Napheesa Collier be a Hall of Famer? Do we think when it's all said and done?
I would imagine.
So, yeah, I think
this is, you could still make the argument that their best is yet to come for her.
Yes, I think so too, because she's still relatively young, right? Like 27, 28-ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah, she's not 30 yet.
And she's made a leap almost every year, especially since she became a mom. Like she comes back from that, she has a great year the next year, and then it's all like, oh my gosh, not just a great year, she's an MVP candidate, and then you kind of wonder what's next. But yeah,
if you made the age-old MVP, what is an MVP?
Mm-hmm.
Is it simply the best player, the
right,
most dominant player, or is it the player who is really the most important player? Napheesa Collier was the best player on a team that came within seconds
a possession
of winning a title.
Yeah.
I voted for Asia last year because her season was just so incredibly books remarkable. But you can make the argument that she might have been more important to her team than anybody in the league.
I think that's fair. I think it absolutely is, because they had a great team, but you've got to have that star who, it's kind of like the Gophers, like they don't necessarily have that star right now. And so when you get to those moments at the end, they have a harder time putting it all together and winning those close games against those great teams. And that's what Collier gives you. She gives you that.
Yeah, I wonder how many, I should probably have looked this up. I'm sure I wrote it at the time, but how many people have opened a playoff run with 80 points in 2 games?
No, that was ridiculous. Yeah.
It's insane.
Ridiculous. Yeah, it was crazy. She was so good. And, again, we'll see if they can. If anybody can run it back, it's got to be them, right? Because they seem like they have the composition and the fortitude, the right attitude to do it. But it's hard. It's hard to. Every season is its own thing, and sometimes it's just hard to to duplicate what was just happening a year ago.
Well, among that starting 5. The only person who you could even argue is at least bumping up against the point where age will start being a question is Kayla McBride.
Right.
And oftentimes that takes the form of injury rather than necessarily a huge drop-off. You know what I mean? So I think that they are in a good position to run it back if they can enjoy the same sort of health that they enjoyed last year.
I think that's a good point. That's still a ways off, but it'll start heating up here pretty soon.
I mean, and maybe starting the season healthy from the start, we'll start to see the Diamond Miller everybody thought that they got with the second pick a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that there's going to be pretty high expectations for her. Now, if she becomes a real threat, it's a pretty good piece to come off the bench.
Absolutely. Give them something, an added dimension, especially on defense, you would imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that season. I'm looking forward to see what the Gophers women's basketball team does the rest of the way. Good question on the top 5 Lynx. I'll have to think about that a little bit more. Anybody else want to weigh in, please do that. But Kent Youngblood, appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, man.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCAA.
Great stuff from Kent, as always, on both the Gopher women's basketball team and the Lynx. He covers both those teams extremely well. Like I said, Gophers have a big game against Purdue tonight. Got to win that one as you try to progress towards the NCAA tournament. And yeah, if you want to weigh in on that all-time Lynx team, please do that as well. I am by no means the definitive authority, willing to listen to other opinions on that for sure. Let us finish with the cooler. Twins, they've been way down in stolen bases for a lot of seasons, and we wrote about it in the Star Tribune today. Phil Miller from the Star Tribune. Rod Carew wants Byron Buxton to steal 50 or 60 bases this season. I don't think that's going to happen. They only stole 65 as a team last year, dead last among the 30 MLB teams. 2 fewer than Ellie De La Cruz, a single person in the league, as Phil wrote. Rocco Baldelli has been the Twins manager for 6 full seasons, right? Six seasons, I guess, counting the COVID years total. His teams have finished 30th in stolen bases 4 times, and they've never finished higher than 24th. When will they ever steal more bases? Well, I think they maybe like to, but their roster is not constructed as such. Fans are worried about it. I got an email from Irving saying, basically saying that to that effect, saying, who on the Twins can steal a base? Assuming Buxton will have a short leash, who else is there? Base stealing is growing as a strategy and will continue to grow. The success rate is rising, and the Twins seem left behind. I agree with that. Willie Castro can steal a base. He had a bunch a couple years ago. Harrison Bader, the new outfielder they just got, has averaged like 17 or 18 over the last few seasons. He can steal a base. Buxton obviously is extremely fast, but they're also trying to keep him healthy, and that's a mitigating factor. You don't want these guys getting hurt on the bases. And then you got Derek Falvey, who's in charge of this whole thing, saying hard to steal many bases if you don't have the speed for it, so they aren't built for it. And then basically saying, strategically, it's maybe not the best move. He said, taking that chance doesn't have as much upside as we probably wish it did. For certain parts of our lineup, doubles and home runs is a better way to score. And the current game stealing bases is not as prominent. It is getting more prominent, though, Derek. It's getting more prominent as the rules for pickoffs changed and things like that. He said it's a part of our offensive strategy, not a core part. There are moments when it's a valuable option, but it's not something we prioritize over everything else. Well, that's obvious if they finish last 4 out of the 6 seasons. So I guess long story short, I don't think Rod Carew should be holding his breath for Byron Buxton to suddenly steal 50 or 60 bases this year. I don't think Twins fans should be holding their breath for the Twins to to steal a whole bunch more bases this season. Should they? Is a better question, and I think it should become part more of their core strategy, because I do think Irving's right. They could get left behind a little bit. They've worked on pitching. They've worked on defense. Now they need to work on their speed and their base stealing ability. That will do it for me today. Lavelle Neal III will hop on tomorrow's show. I think we got some soccer talk on Friday with John Marthaler, with the Loons getting set to start the MLS season on Saturday. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Stay warm. I'll be back at it again tomorrow.